Hello and welcome to JCU's Canyon Professional Development Session. Today's session is titled Reflective Practices in Teaching. Reflective teaching asks a teacher to examine their underlying beliefs about teaching and learning to assess alignment with actual classroom practice. In this interactive session, participants will engage in activities to uncover their beliefs and learn strategies for reflecting on teaching that positively impact the classroom. Essentially, I am hoping that as a part of your participation in this session, you have a chance to just think about why you got into teaching, what kind of motivates you and encourages you as you teach, and then what are some things that you can do to improve practice. So that's really what we're going to reflect on as a part of today's session. My name is Nathan Hollis II. I am an assistant professor in the College of Education at Grand Canyon University in Phoenix, Arizona. I have been with Grand Canyon University close to 10 years, soon to celebrate a 10-year anniversary in September 2022. I am also a doctoral candidate in the PhD program of general psychology with an emphasis in cognition and instruction. So welcome. As a part of our goals today, we have two that we want to achieve. One, I really want to get to um, who you identify as being, right? So in this session, we're really going to take some time to examine the basis of your identity, who you are, and all the different components and complexities that may include. Secondly, as a goal, we also want to help identify the ways in which the identity that you have aligns with your intended practice. That's why it's really important to talk about who you are so that we can see if there's alignment between that and how you teach. Because most often there are very many teachers who leave the profession or who are frustrated while in the profession because they don't believe that they're able to practice teaching in a way that really honors who they are. They feel as though they have to give up a part of themselves in order to be the most effective teacher. That's not necessarily the case. So we'll first start off with our very first discussion question, and that is, um, were most of your K-12 experiences positive, negative, or neutral? I want you to think back to being in school, kindergarten or preschool if you want, but kindergarten to 12th grade, and kind of just think about the experiences that you have had overall in general. Were they in safe neighborhoods? Did you have teachers that seemed caring, and giving, and supportive? Did you have teachers that seemed highly skilled? Right? It's important to really think about when you think about your teachers, not just the caring side, but did you believe that you were able to learn from them? Or the opposite true? Were you attending schools or a school in an unsafe neighborhood? Did the teachers and staff seem as if you were just a number? They didn't necessarily care about you. You didn't feel supported. Perhaps maybe you had some struggles or challenges you didn't feel supported in. I want you to think about that because this really connects us to our own identity. We identify as teachers either because we had some really positive interactions in school that we want to replicate as a teacher. Perhaps we had some negative experiences that we want to fix and we want to make better for the next generation of students. But whatever the case, think about that, take note of that as we move forward. As you can see in this wonderful picture, that is me graduating from kindergarten in Houston, Texas. I'm a native Houstonian, and great story in that my neighbor, Mrs. Torres, was my kindergarten teacher. And the story is told, I was a little bit too young to remember, but my mother said that I would often come to her just infuriated and crying because my older siblings were able to go to school every day and I stayed at home. And so I would cry and ask, why can't I go to school like my brother? Essentially, she started looking around and looking for a school that I could go to as a 4 year old. And she just didn't want to send me to the local preschool because she said oftentimes all the students would do is kind of play recklessly all day or color. And by 4, I was already reading and enjoying reading, so she wanted to nurture that. Long story short, she um, began talking to one of the neighbors, Mrs. Torres, who was starting a new job at a local private school as a kindergarten teacher. She also had a daughter who would be starting kindergarten. And so she said, I will just bring Nathan down to my house and I'll test him to see if he's ready. And so she brought me to her house. And as my mother tells the story, in less than an hour, Mrs. Torres and I came back, and she said, not only can he read and write, he communicates very well, and I think he's ready. And she also told my mother, look, I would be more than willing to drive him to school every day and bring him home. That's one less thing for you to worry about. And so that's what she did. Mrs. Torres drove her daughter and I to school every day and brought us home. If you could, in that moment, just imagine how that opened my world. Imagine not only the love that I had for Mrs. Torres, who was a wonderful woman and very intelligent, beautiful, in that she allowed me to flourish. She knew me personally. She took time to dedicate and honor my curiosity for learning. And it helped me to develop a sincere love for education, all from the very start in kindergarten. How many of you have a Mrs. Torres in your life? How many of you were motivated, like I was motivated, to become a teacher because you had great teachers? But I want to give you a few minutes to kind of think about that or take note. Why did you become an educator? What were the motivators? Who were the people that are a part of your story? Now I want to show you a video that was given by a parent, and this parent is also talking about some of her experiences within the school system.
When I was in 3rd grade, my teacher made me read The Mouse and the Motorcycle. And then she made me answer questions to prove that I read The Mouse and the Motorcycle. It made me hate The Mouse and the Motorcycle. I remember thinking a lot of times through school, there has got to be a better way. I wish my teacher knew a better way. So I went into teaching not because I loved school. I went into teaching because I wanted students to know that their voices mattered. I wanted to empower them to understand that they could access the world through new opportunities and learning. And now that I'm a mom, it matters to me more than ever. This is Abby and Zach on their first day of kindergarten in 1st grade. And they love to learn. They are so curious, and it makes me so happy to see this. The other night, we were reading a story about giraffes, and my son asked questions that I didn't have the answers to. So he said, Mom, Google it. So I grabbed my phone, we looked up some answers, we watched some videos, and we found answers to the questions. But it prompted more questions and more conversation, and that was the best part. So the thing is, this is how my kids like to learn. They don't know any different. They've grown up with Netflix and YouTube and access to information on demand. And this is how they're used to learning and accessing their world. The problem is that our school system is not set up to foster this type of learning. So I worry. I worry as a mom what's going to happen to their love of learning as they move through school. And a recent Gallup poll highlights that this is a real concern. As students move through school, they're less likely to be interested in learning, less engaged, and have less opportunities to build on their own unique strengths and interests. So to understand what this looks like in our classrooms today, let's take a look into one. This is Mrs. Jacobs' classroom. She's calling on each of her students, one by one, to memorize and identify each of the 50 states and their geographic location. Now, if you look closely, you might notice the atlas, you might notice the worksheet, You might not notice the iPad that's turned over on her desk. So with resources and access, not much has changed in this classroom since when I was in school. I see this as a symptom of a system that has continued to add on new resources and expectations to a very old and outdated paradigm of school. I think we have the opportunity, but more than that, the obligation to change how students learn in school today. But to do this, it will require fundamentally rethinking how we support our teachers to design these experiences. But there's hope. There's a lot of teachers out there that are doing just that. So to see this opportunity, let's take a look into another classroom. This is Miss Kim's classroom. Take a minute, you won't find her very quickly. She's huddled with a group of students as they're practicing their pitch they're going to propose to a local water board, while another group of students is busy practicing in their proposal for a business. Yet another group of students is building a website to launch their new business, and another group is building a prototype. These fourth graders are partnering with local organizations to understand challenges that exist and design solutions to impact their local community. Now, Ms. Kim did not get this unit from her mandated curriculum. She created it. But for teachers to create these opportunities for our kids, it will require leaders. Leaders who create a culture where they inspire risk-taking and opportunities for teachers to integrate new ideas in learning. And I've been working with some great leaders around this country who are doing just that. And they are changing how students learn, not one classroom at a time, but they're making a shift and creating a culture and innovation that allows this to be the norm and not the exception. But it requires three things, and the first is a shared vision. You see, both classrooms we visited today, they both had one-to-one technology, and they both had very hardworking teachers. But the experiences that were designed in those classrooms will produce very different type of learners, workers and citizens. So effective leaders are working together to create a shared vision, for a community to understand what the desired teaching and learning looks like. And teachers thrive when they have a clear vision, aligned expectations, but autonomy to get there in a way that meets their unique population. But to get to this vision, we have a lot to learn, which brings me to number 2, learning as a process and not an event. Seminal research from Joyce and Showers highlights that for teachers to truly integrate new learning, they have to have opportunities to not only learn, but for trial and error, to practice, opportunities for authentic, rich collaboration with their peers, and opportunities for ongoing coaching and feedback. Leaders prioritize learning for teachers, create time in the school day for them to learn and develop the new knowledge, skills, and mindsets that they need to make these shifts in their classrooms. And the second part, for us to truly evolve with the world today, we need to embrace number 3, and we need to go open. An innovative leader and friend of mine, George Koros, points out that isolation is now a choice that educators make. So leaders and teachers who are making these shifts in their classrooms and their schools are embracing an open culture. They're opening classrooms, allowing teachers to work together and share and learn from each other's insights and strengths and challenges. They're opening access to information and ideas. And they're creating and building and learning through networks to improve our schools. So for you systems thinkers or aspiring systems thinkers, if we understand that every system is perfectly designed to create the results it gets, then think about these 2 questions. Are you creating systems for teachers to comply and implement your ideas and your programs? Or are you creating systems to bring people together to learn and create better opportunities for the kids in their classrooms? You see, I want Abby and Zach to grow up in an era of education where they are inspired, where they love learning more today than their first day of kindergarten and first grade when they graduate high school. I want them to be able to grow and learn and be able to build on their own strength and interests so that they know that they have a place in this world. But to do that, it will require leaders who create a shared vision, who embrace learning as a culture, and allow their schools and classrooms to go open. So I'll leave you with this final thought. We can continue to buy new programs and buy new resources, but if we fail to engage teachers and empower them to design better experiences for the kids in our classrooms, I believe we will miss out on the greatest opportunity in educational reform. Thank you.
All right. So thank you for letting me show you that video. And what I want to highlight from that is it is not my intention for me to assume that I know what your school culture, your classroom culture, what some of your challenges and successes may be. It's not my intention to try to just say, here's a one-stop fix for everyone. Instead, rather than what was shared in that video being the highlight that you take away and an automatic fix for yourselves, I hope that you take the opportunity to understand that it's really about the video, was really about you sitting back and thinking about what may be needed for your classroom, for your school, for your organization, and being the advocate to bring that change about. As reflective teaching practices, oftentimes what does not happen, because we're so much in the go of things and we're trying to make things happen, and there's often challenges with how we spend our time and manage our time, we don't necessarily take the time to reflect on what the issues are and what some potential solutions can be. And so that's really the takeaway that I want you to have from that video is teachers can create their own experiences. If you find yourself experiencing a humdrum, status quo type of existence in your classroom, where you continue to do the routine things throughout your given days, if that's the experience that you have and you don't want that experience anymore, you can create a new one. If you have students who aren't necessarily following along and they're not engaged, don't have the involvement that you like from your stakeholders, then you can figure out during your reflective time how to create that buy-in and how to create more people who are involved in the process. So that vision casting first starts with you. And so I want to encourage you to take that time, take some time to think about how you can make sure that the change that you believe could happen, happen. And then later on, figure out how. The very next thing that I want you to focus on, because I believe this thing sometimes is the roadblock for a lot of people, is I want you to figure out how to identify what your sabotages may be, the things that may be the hurdles or the challenges or that get in the way of you taking the time to think about how to create solutions. And so, as a part of the next activity, I want you to scan this QR code. And as a part of this QR code, there's a positive intelligence survey that you can take. And it does take a few minutes, not long, but it takes a few minutes for you to complete this survey. And essentially, what happens is the survey results will tell you what kind of things create hurdles for you. And they call them saboteurs. Saboteurs is another way to say, hey, whenever I'm stressed or whenever I'm in a moment of crisis, whenever something's not going the way that I think it should, or that I wish that it would go, what are some things getting in my way? And oftentimes you'll find that those things that may be getting in your way are things that you can control. That we don't even give credit to, but we can control them. When I took this test earlier this year, I took it at the encouragement of my wife. And she wanted us to take it as a couple and to figure out what we can do. Even though we've been married for 20 years, she was like, what can we do to kind of improve ourselves so that we can show up better for each other? It was a great experience for us. We, in turn, had hours worth of dialogue about our results. And we have two teenagers that we asked that they take the survey as well. And the four of us sat for over 4 hours to talk about our saboteurs, how they can sometimes show up in our demonstrated behavior, and then where they come from. Okay. So it's really, really important as a part of taking this test and discovering what your saboteur or saboteurs may be, that you identify where they come from. It can be from a childhood experience, it can be from a trauma, it can be from a memory. They come from a place. And that's important to know because as you talk about reflecting, this is a reflective practice activity. As you talk about reflecting for solutions in your workplace, in your classroom, in your organization, it's important to anchor that in what could be a potential saboteur for yourself. Okay. So if you haven't already done so, please make sure you scan that QR code so that you can take the saboteur test and answer the question, how do I show up for other people? How do I show up for others? It'll be interesting because in many cases, people show up the way they intend. There are some instances where people have the greatest of intentions to show up as a loving, supportive, caring teacher, and they find out from taking this that that may be not how others perceive you for whatever reason. All right, your final discussion question. We talked about how you identify and kind of the basis of that identity. We also talked about perhaps the people or things that have motivated or influenced you to become a teacher. Those are important. As a part of your final discussion question, I want you to think about first and then answer, does your reason for becoming an educator remain at the forefront of your mind? In other words, is there intentionality with how you show up? Because if there isn't, I want you to work on that so that it is. You should be very intentional about your relationships with your students. It should not be something you take for granted. And why? Because our students are all unique individuals. And if I'm treating Nathan the same way that I treat Sally, which is the same way I treat David, then it's problematic. I'm choosing to stay the same and treat everyone um, with the same level of thought and behaviors is problematic. Now, there's nothing wrong with you being consistent in who you are, but some of that bend and that flexibility should come from the different needs and the different interests of our students. So think about, does your reason for becoming an educator remain at the forefront of your mind? And if it does, talk about the why. If it doesn't, talk about the why so that you can be a little bit more intentional about your interactions with other people. Hopefully, as a part of these three discussion questions that I've given you to think about, there's no assumption that you've given full thought to them by the time you've completed this professional development session, but hopefully you have a start for more reflective thinking because it's important that those types of questions and more are a part of how you go into your practice. Thank you for your time today. As a part of our Grand Canyon University K-12 educational development, we offer free professional development sessions. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel for hundreds of free PD videos to support teachers, also support students and administrators. There's also a free resource for you to take advantage of, so please do so and describe now. And lastly, we have the canyonpd.com to navigate. This is our one-stop shop for all Canyon PD K-12 educational outreach. And you'll find information about all of the customized professional development that's on demand. Canyon PD Solutions to Go is a low cost for you and for your organization. And so based on the interest and needs that you may have, you can find something that may work directly for you. Last but not least, I'll leave you the resources and references that I use as a part of this presentation. Feel free to use this information for your own knowledge or to share with other people, including creating this PowerPoint presentation. And again, my name is Nathan Hollis II. I want to thank you for your time. And here's my contact information. Please feel free to reach out to me. Contact me should you need or if you have any questions. Otherwise, thank you for your time and have a great day.